This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is June 18th, 2026.
I'm Scott Linnebaum.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, the province needs more power. We're delaying tunnels. Housing deals are going through, and the House of Commons is going on summer vacation. Like I really feel like I need right now. I am going away for the weekend and not ready for it, but that's fine. It's all fine.
Look at you. Summer's my busy season, so it's only going to get worse from here.
It's also my busy season because I'm employing 4 people and need to manage them, and decided I'm doing a 2-week vacation in the middle of that contract. So lots to prep in the next week. Support this podcast, though, at patreon.com/politicos. Let's start here in BC. There was a story we didn't actually cover a couple weeks ago that ties into this week's story that really all tie together with this idea that we don't have enough electricity. The forecasts we had made 3 to 8 years ago and discussed on this podcast all seem pretty optimistic that BC Hydro was doing good, especially with Site C coming online. But just in the last year, all of those forecasts have gone, oh, actually we have half as much as we need.
Yeah, Site C is pretty much already accounted for in the hydro demand, and turns out we need a whole lot more.
And depending who you ask, you'll get different answers. The official answer, as far as I can tell, is just a mix of different things. Major industrial projects, the LNG projects, a lot of the new mines are all creating very large demands. Data centers are possibly part of it, and increased electrification. Although I think that was always factored in. The uptake of EVs and heat pumps was always predicted. But I think the real push on like building out mines, building out LNG ports, and
not just doing those, but doing those in an electrified manner. Because there are plenty of LNG export terminals out there, and particularly mines, that don't run off the general power grid, but they have, in the case of LNG, use on-site LNG generation, or in the case of mines, use on-site diesel generation for their power requirements. And the definite push in BC seems to be in the direction of, yes, we're going to build those out, but we're also going to do it with electricity rather than fossil fuels as the underlying energy source for those industrial and resource operations.
Yeah, and the story that was kind of quiet at first a couple of weeks ago, because BC Hydro didn't put a big press release out on this, is that they're actually going to keep 2 natural gas-fired power plants running past their initial planned phase-out. BC famously has a pretty green electrical grid, mostly running on hydro, but there is a little bit of fossil fuel in it. So in this case, Hydro filed with the BC Utilities Commission permission or plans to extend operations of the Island Generation gas plant near Campbell River and the McMahon gas plant near Fort St. John as a way to help fill a 500 megawatt generating shortfall anticipated by 2030. And it was a very weird story to come out because the first person who reported on it sounds like a crime. They're like, I read this filing to the BC Utilities Commission. And you're like, is that a real thing? What is this? And then, the reporters get in on it and do the work additionally. I'm not saying anyone was a crank on this. But yeah, actually it was Barry Penner of the Energy Futures Institute who was the first to report on this. But the Vancouver Sun and others have picked it up now and have pointed out like, this is quite something for BC Hydro to just quietly keep some gas plants on to help us power the need to get more LNG out. Real change on our climate goals and vibes in this province in the last 18 months.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Though there's a pretty substantive difference between, say, building a new one and just extending a contract for power a little more than had originally been planned.
Yeah, and I think some of this is possibly we're going to use the natural gas plants as backup for peak power demands until we get better solar build-outs, better battery build-outs and other ways to offset that, where my solar panels don't power through the night kind of thing.
Yeah, most don't. And yeah, gas plants are usually pretty complementary with renewables on just a grid management perspective, because they do have the ability, unlike a lot of other power plants, to be rapidly dispatchable, because coal or nuclear, it takes a little bit to bring them up to power and then back down, so they just aren't good for filling in quickly the way a natural gas turbine is. So they do help definitely with some of the renewable intermittency issues, at least until batteries are further along in their development and deployment.
Of course, we do have natural batteries in this province in the way of hydroelectric dams, where you just keep more water up above. And the next one they're looking at is Site E. Site D apparently is no good. We're just going to skip that and go up to E, which is...
Yeah, you can't even Google much about what Site D was, but apparently back when they were doing the initial surveying of the Peace River system for hydropower, that was one of the sites they identified and pretty quickly ruled out. So it's never going to get seriously considered. But Site E is and will be the last one in BC, at least, because it's pretty much right on the Alberta border.
Yeah, Site E, all these were originally proposed back in 1958. Officially, it's at the confluence of the Peace and Alsace rivers. But yeah, go on a Google map and I'm trying to look for an exact number, but I feel like it's within 10 or 15 kilometers of the border. It feels like we're basically building a wall in northeastern British Columbia with Alberta, which might make sense in the long term with how that province is going, to just have a wall and just start it as a dam. The debate will be interesting on this, depending how they move it forward, given the wounds are all still really sore on, I think, all sides from how Site C went down. Or I guess we should call it the John Horgan Dam now. But, this is the one that the NDP has decided to dig up, as opposed to, inherit and begrudgingly accept to move forward, versus, here now they're the ones starting the conversation. They're the ones who have to work with local First Nations, property owners, and everyone else who might be affected and make the case.
Indeed. And in addition to that, they're also looking at another site for hydropower. This is the Bute Inlet project, which has been another one that's being considered off and on. This one would have even more capacity than Site E would, coming in at 900 megawatts to Site E 750. Those who don't have their geography of all of the various fjords up and down the coast of BC, this is one of the ones that comes off the body of water between the north of Vancouver Island and the mainland on the mainland side, going up there. Generally pretty remote in that respect, and unlike Site E, which is going to be in the Peace Valley with a bunch of agricultural land, this is mountains and forest where this one's going to be. And I'm a little curious to see how they stack up in terms of their controversialness on it, because you could make an argument either way, where on one hand you're not only doing it in the general vicinity of Site C, but you have all the same issues around farmland and stuff that came up with the Site C debates. On the other hand, you're despoiling a natural area that has not had really any development in it if you go with the Bute Inlet one. So I can see an argument for either one of those being the more controversial of the two.
According to Adrian Dix, the Bute Inlet project has as a main proponent the Hamalko First Nation. So potentially that has some initial support that I don't know that Site E has, given how Site C went. But I also don't know that area well enough to know if there's overlapping claims that could complicate it, as happens in much of this province.
Probably.
Yeah.
And also, as we saw with Fairy Creek, just as the local First Nation is involved in it, doesn't mean you aren't going to get a bunch of environmentalists all worked up about it either.
Or even that it's a unanimous opinion of the First Nation, because you can have elders split on many of these issues, complicating it. The other thing complicating it is apparently the Clean Energy Act does ban the work they need to do on Site E. So Dix has already promised a bill in the fall to amend it, not to allow them to build it and not to fully remove prohibitions, but just allow them to do technical reviews so they can think about it a little bit more.
Well, that seems silly. Specifically the prohibition on it, because hydropower, it's a clean energy. Like, surely that should be something on the, we're going to seriously consider this under a Clean Energy Act, rather than a, no, we're not going to do that.
There are a few specific prohibitions in the Clean Energy Act. I just pulled it up. The Two Rivers projects, which includes the Peace River and Columbia River systems, the Burrard Thermal is also in there.
That one's actually being closed down, and I believe is in the process of being demolished and not part of the ones that are being extended.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what that bill does and how that debate goes. But interesting times for power generation in the province. Even more interesting times for renewing the debates over vehicular infrastructure in the Lower Mainland, as the province announced this week that the contractor for the George Massey Tunnel replacement project has been fired. It wasn't Mike Farnworth didn't have anything negative to say, just sort of we're exercising our right to not work with them anymore announcement. I think he didn't want to disparage them publicly.
Even said they had good value from the contractor. So to get a little bit of technical procurement and project management stuff, this was originally done as a design build, and that's where you have a consortium of usually a large general contractor and an engineering firm working together on everything from the design through construction. So you do kind of everything in-house in that team, and there are some advantages to that. You get like a much closer working relationship between the engineering and the contractor side, because in a typical way it's done where you have those separate, the engineer designs something, gets bidded out, and means and methods are just left to the contractor. So you can get more alignment if you bring them in together on that, because you can tailor your designs to how the contractor is going to execute on them and get better, more efficient work that way. But sometimes these also tend to go a little over budget, but just hardly unusual for any particular contracting arrangement for major projects. So it has its proponents and critics on it as a general approach. But now, instead of doing that, they want to break up the work and bid it all out independently. In theory, they claim this is going to get them more savings. The track record on that with other projects has been hit and miss, so who knows if that's actually going to work out.
Yeah, the announcement really just raises a lot more questions than anything, and reinvigorated the debate from the 2017 election, where Christy Clark promised everyone a 10-lane bridge that would be cheap as fuck and magically done soon. And people
cheap, like $4 billion.
Yeah. And that's what they said the tunnel is going to cost, except now Delta Councillor Dylan Kruger is saying they are actually talking about this tunnel replacement costing $11 billion, and the province is trying to get Ottawa to pony up some money for it. But Kruger's always been a bit of a, I don't think he's lying here, but he's definitely always been a critic and kind of a curmudgeon.
Yeah, he's been a long-time proponent of significant expansion of the route through there.
Sure, and it's not just that. He is one of like regionally, there's like a cohort of center-right, right-wing noisemakers among city councillors. And he's in that crew.
Yeah. Also, for context, he's also running for mayor too, so it's probably a good campaign issue in Delta, particularly.
Yeah. It's been tiring hearing a lot of people talk about, if we'd only just done the bridge, it would be done and on budget by now. It's like, maybe it would be done.
Maybe not. Hard to say.
Counterfactual is what they are. And
yeah, particularly with like major infrastructure projects, which, there's generally a history of them going over budget, although, you don't often hear of the ones that are on time and on budget. So, bit of such an effect going on there, but it's pretty common for significant projects to end up costing more and taking longer than anticipated.
And this is a particularly just difficult one, right? Because it's not as simple as a bridge over bedrock. It's going through the river runoff. It's very soft ground. You need something that's very seismically stable, which honestly the current tunnel is not. Or I think they've done some upgrades on that at least.
They have done some upgrades, both to the structure and the ground around it. So either way, there would have need to been significant ground improvements going on with it to reduce the liquefaction risk. But yeah, just functionally, a tunnel that runs the whole length just spreads out the loads a whole lot better than a bridge going down to two piers. Get a lot more concentration there, so the foundation has to be a little more significant on there. And there would have no doubt had to be some large, deep pile foundations put in there if they'd gone with the bridge, which, it's definitely costly and intense work, particularly in soft soils like that, but it is doable. I think there's sometimes a bit of a misunderstanding that you actually need bedrock for large structures, and you don't. You can transfer the loads through pile foundations and using the basically the friction between the piles and the surrounding soil to transfer those loads.
Anything is possible with enough money and engineering kind of thing.
Pretty much.
It's very fun that we get to continue debating this. I'm not against a replacement. I thought the Christy Clark Bridge was wild in terms of like what she pitched out of nowhere versus what is necessary. It's the kind of like overbuild that just moves all of your traffic to the next bridge.
Yeah, it was what? I want to say 12 lanes was what was proposed at the time.
Like there was some good features of it, of having like space for SkyTrain or rail or something, and multi-mode.
Yeah, but shipping. I haven't looked at this closely, but I'm pretty sure the good chance the tunnel, even if they definitely the existing one, I'm pretty sure if they twin it, it's probably not have the right grades to run rail through. So anything's gonna have to be on a bus. Would have allowed larger ships to come up the Fraser into the port facilities past the bridge. So, there would have been some benefit on that for sure. I would have been perfectly happy with an 8-lane bridge that had been built by now. Since the NDP's come into office, they approved the Patella replacement and got that thing built. It could have definitely happened in the time. I just find the back and forth on this thing exhausting, and I wish we would have just made a decision and stuck with it. And, the NDP thought 12 was excessive, which, it is. Knock it down to 8 lanes and just call it a day there, and could have had something in place now. But just how long this has gone on and how much we continue to debate it is just annoying, and a case of why nothing gets built in this country. My
favorite part of the announcement is where they say they're still planning to have shovels in the ground next year and a bridge, something open by 2030, which I cannot see happening. Maybe a couple years after that, but
yeah, you're rebidding the project, and it's not a small project either. A lot of work goes into preparing bids by contractors. that alone is going to push this back. There's no other way around it. You can't spend months rebidding something and not have it affect the schedule.
Speaking of spending months doing nothing or just talking about plans, North Saanich has recommendations from an advisor on how to increase housing supply. We've talked about this kind of approach from the provincial government a few times, as the government appoints independent advisors when municipalities don't meet their housing projects or housing targets. The advisor then comes back with recommendations, and the government then has to review those and eventually release those to the municipality, and then order. Like in West Van, I think they're at the point of the final stage where the government just says, okay, this is your zoning law now. And it took 18 months to get there, roughly, it feels like.
Well, longer than that. So
depends when you count from.
Enabling legislation to this was passed in the fall of 2023, if I'm remembering rightly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's closer to like 3 years than 18 months at this point.
Well, it depends whether you count from the appointment of an advisor or but yeah,
either way, like, counts on them counts on a lot of like bureaucratic back and forth, gives municipalities a lot of chance to rate the puck. And on this one specifically, the housing target that North Saanich didn't meet, that's requiring now this whole process to go through, was 60 units. We're spending a lot of time and energy on something that is at best a rounding error on the housing needs of the region where North Saanich is in, the province overall. Like, it's just a huge amount of time and energy has gone into this for like such an incremental gain versus like a number of other models they could have used. And I was like pretty optimistic when the Housing Supply Act got introduced, and I have just gotten pretty exhausted with all of this, and my willingness to give the NDP the benefit of the doubt on their housing stuff is rapidly dwindling. Listen,
that target of 60 net new units, which I think represented 75% of their need, it was something like that.
They set the targets at less than 100%. I believe it was 75 of what the projected housing needs were. And keep in mind, there was a lot of criticism that those housing needs they came up with before they reduced them were pretty far from what like CMHC was saying was the province's housing needs. So there's a lot of like fractions of fractions built into all of this.
And even within that, North Saanich was able to deliver 12 units. North Saanich is a municipality of about 15,000 people, so it's not nothing. Or about 12,000 people. It's not a little hamlet, but it's also not a full city.
Yeah, and it's like, I grew up there. It's not dense at all. I'm not even sure if there's like a single apartment building in the whole municipality. Like, I'm pretty sure all the ones on that end of the peninsula sit in Sydney, not North Saanich. It's somewhere between suburbia and exurpia in its character.
I'm just scrolling its Wikipedia page. It's also 90% white or European ancestry, which is down from 96% in 2001.
Yeah, that tracks my high school.
That's neither here nor there for the housing targets. But yeah, North Saanich needed to build one mid-size strata condo building. Failed. An advisor was appointed in January. In March, at the end of March, the advisor submitted a final report with 19 recommendations to the government. The ministry sat on that until Tuesday, June 16th, when they finally gave it to the municipality, the district, to actually start working on, because I guess the ministry wanted to decide whether to endorse those recommendations and to specify exactly how this district will have to implement them. But all of this over, like you said, 60 homes in one small municipality. Like, this approach, I kind of get for a larger municipality, like if Vancouver or Surrey were behind and you want to like try to play fair with them. But man, this is spending a lot of money because we don't even have the deal of what these advisors were paid, how much consulting work is done on this. You could have gotten some houses built for that money.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's proven a pretty terrible use of resources on this. And I've talked a lot about how I would have preferred they got like the Japanese model. I also think it's just something where they could have gone with, your municipality is below its housing target. Well, great. Any builder that wants to come in and build a building code compliant set of housing on land that is shortly residential, bam, auto approved, or you can take it to a court and get them to issue an order requiring the city to allow it, or set up a provincial tribunal to do that. But just some way to make it so it's not the province batting things back and forth, but you're not meeting your targets, we immediately skip to you can just build a bunch more housing there by cutting out the city's ability to deny it.
Yeah, the entire process became far too, let's make sure we have done this correctly, just in case the District of North Saanich decides to fight back or something. Like, it drew it out far too much. It did depoliticize it a lot because, like...
Did it?
Well, like, municipalities will fight it, but I don't feel like they get much in those fights. Like, the province just goes, well, these are just independent advisor recommendations on how you had to meet the targets you didn't meet. And, like,
I don't know.
The local councils are definitely stamping their feet, but well, I guess we'll see in October if they can win re-election on that.
I kind of see it as the opposite, where it's a case that, like, every time one of these things happens, you get a bunch of headlines and, the usual suspects coming out and talking about how the province is stamping all over cities and undermining principles of local control and all of that. And in doing this, they've set themselves up for continual conflict and continual headlines on this, which, occasionally can be good if they're actually, like, making a point of doing the fight and can leverage it. But, like, they're not doing that right now. The energy that was in the housing ministry when it was under Avi Long has like evaporated, along with the energy in pretty much every other ministry in this government. But, like, the thing was basically predicated on having a housing minister that would be aggressive and continually played the bad cop with municipalities, and that's an inherently unsustainable model, because either you get a change in government that has a change in priorities and you lose that bit, or you just have a minister that's not willing to be that confrontational on it.
Well, and I don't think Christine Boyle's an incompetent minister. It's like you say, it's just not set up for her strengths, perhaps. And I think the other half of it is, like, none of the opposition parties are talking about housing. Like, we talked about how the Conservatives had nothing in their leadership race about housing. I think other than Christine Elliott had some, like, broad proposals, but nothing as deep as we've seen in the past few years on housing. The Greens haven't talked much about it. And so, I don't know, maybe one BC has, like, this detailed housing policy that would shock me, but I would doubt it.
I mean, their detailed housing policy is probably deport all the foreigners with an incredibly loose definition of what's constituted under that category.
Yeah. So it leaves a lot of room for the government to just flop on this, which is not good. It would be nice for them to do better, because we've seen some modest improvement in housing costs, but we're still a long way from affordable. Which I think takes us to the next story, which is the federal government is going to throw some big money our way to help us cut those housing costs, at least at the new construction side.
Yeah, so this follows on similar announcements they've made in Ontario and I believe one or two other provinces as well. So they're coming in with $1.6 billion from the, what's it called now?
The Build Canada Strong Fund?
Yeah. The Build Community Strong Fund. This is more or less a rebrand of the Housing Accelerator Fund, and they've had like one or two other names over the years on it. So, yet another case of showing up with a checkbook and hoping that it'll nudge cities into actually letting the housing be built on the scale it needs to be, which is not generally proven all that successful. Yet Toronto watered down their attempt to deal with this with their splits policy. You had Calgary just like flat out reverse their changes recently, and the most the federal government's done is send them a strongly worded letter about how they're not living up to their agreement on it. Previous deals with Ottawa around cutting development charges, specifically the city of Ottawa in this case, not the term for the federal government, around cutting their development charges that they just never followed through on despite getting the money. Like, there's definitely been a significant problem with how the federal government's come in with this on the accountability and turning checks going out into actual results.
So the way this chunk of change is set up, that $1.6 billion over 10 years is going to be matched by British Columbia, so $3.2 billion available for cities. Cities will have to agree, in theory, according to this, to lower their development cost charges for multi-unit housing by up to 50%. Which they say would save up to $40,000 per unit, and expand housing enabling infrastructure. Basically, we're going to give you money to offset development charges, which is something people like Mike Hurley, Burnaby Mayor, are happy to hear, because he says we can't lower development charges because we need something to pay for municipal infrastructure. And
that's property taxes. You're supposed to pay for it over the life of the building with property taxes. But unfortunately, cities have figured out that the people who don't live there yet in the houses that aren't built don't get a vote. So you can front load all of the costs on that. But it ends up resulting in unaffordable housing and, like this says here, tens of thousands of dollars in extra costs. And 50% of the development costs amounting to $40,000 is a low estimate among the estimates I've seen for the impact of development charges on the cost of new housing.
So I guess we'll start to see, because there's no application portal open yet. Cities don't know exactly what this is going to look like, and the details of how that part will work are TBD, it seems like. But that's not all the money. There's in total roughly $5 billion of federal money coming. The next chunk of change is, the next biggest, actually the biggest, is $2.5 billion over 10 years for transit projects as part of the Canada Public Transit Fund. So that's money to support the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain extension is specifically mentioned, and increasing service in high traffic areas. That's in addition to previously announced support for TransLink and BC Transit. So that's good. I like train. Yeah. I like transit.
We definitely need to expand the transit system in BC. So, yeah, good the semester money going for it.
There's
would
also
have liked to have heard like a little more on the specific projects other than just Surrey-Langley SkyTrain, which is already underway, and presumably they should have had most of the funding in place for already.
Scott, if they announced all the projects right now, that undermines their ability to have more press conferences.
I think you underestimate the ability of the Liberals to re-announce the same thing
and the BC NDP. Well, there is more money in here. There's $600 million over 3 years, which will be matched by BC to modernize and expand health infrastructure, such as hospitals, emergency rooms, urgent care centers, etc. I did look it up. The first phase of the Burnaby Hospital expansion, which completed earlier this year, cost $600 million. So this is, with BC's funding, 2 hospital expansions.
Or maybe we're going to uncancel the canceled expansion at Burnaby, and what's the other hospital? There's 2 that got
I don't know if I heard about this other one.
I thought it was 2, but it might have been a different
It was
a
phase
school or
2 of
something.
Burnaby.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm wondering if this is the thing that's going to end up saving the cancelled projects
That would
on that.
That would be good for the government. The NDP always needs to shore up its base in Burnaby. But
Well, it also comes. I think it's less that specific one, although it's not great. It's more the general, like the NDP can't get anything built in this province thing, where it's not like any one thing; it's the cumulative weight of everything stacked up on top of each other.
like there are a lot of hospital expansions going ahead. Royal Columbian and New West, I know, just had a big expansion open up. Surrey Hospital's having expansions. There's a number throughout the interior, and the same goes with schools. It's like for every school that's not being built, one or two are getting built. And so we're in this frustrating situation, I imagine, from the government side, where the infrastructure deficit is so big that you can't get credit for the things you do because there's always something you didn't do, or you got a little over your skis and had to stop doing, which is the worst thing. But there is money here for a school. Specifically, the Tumbler Ridge School is going to get $100 million from each the provincial and federal governments to be rebuilt. They're also going to renovate the local health center and remove the existing school. And they are going to start that construction as early as this summer. So good news for the residents of Tumbler Ridge who, deserve some good news this year.
They had previously announced this, had they not?
They had talked about planning. I don't know if the money had been announced. Maybe it had. Maybe that's a re-announcement.
Yeah, they definitely announced they were going to
press release.
tear and build down, which does kind of imply that there'd be money there. Also, I did look it up. In addition to the Burnaby Hospital, there were healthcare facility contracts, not necessarily hospitals, canceled for Delta, Abbotsford, Chilliwack, and Kelowna.
Oh, those might have been UPCCs or whatever.
Yeah, as well as there was a canceled contract for a long-term care facility in Fort St. John.
Right. That was all announced at the same time in the budget. There's more in this federal announcement. BC's getting a one-time gift of $284 million from the federal government to, quote, reduce barriers to new construction. Not clear what that's going to be. That's a special Government of Canada bill that was introduced apparently to just give us money. Cool. And I'm curious on your thoughts on this. There is a Canada-British Columbia partnership on condo conversions that they say will use innovative financing tools to convert 2,200 vacant condo units in priority growth areas into affordable homes as a partnership with BC Housing.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what to make of this. On one hand, it does not seem to necessarily be the best course of action to be using the provincial and federal funds to backstop private builders who can't sell their condos right now.
That's what it does sound like, to be clear. It does sound like saying condos aren't selling, the governments are going to buy them up and rent them out.
There's a question of whether or not they're going to be able to negotiate significantly better prices than what the current list price where they're not selling is on that, and how much the developers are going to want to get those vacant units off their balance sheets. But they will be probably taking a loss if they do that. Not that they're not necessarily going to have to take a loss anyway on there. So that's a question. I don't love the idea of this basically being a backstop. I think you could make an argument though that bad public policy has been set around the condo construction, where cities in particular, going back to the development fees, have structured everything on the assumption that real estate will only go up, and anything they do that will result in increased costs for condos will just get offset by rising prices. So there's, it's effectively free money. And I think we've seen when the condo market starts to correct how faulty that assumption has been on this. And I think there's a pretty solid argument that cities screwed this one up significantly. That said, I don't think it's necessarily the federal or provincial government's job to come in and rescue them on that. But on the other hand, you also don't want to get in a situation where, to use the 2008 example, what happened there was, particularly in the States, a lot of companies went out of business following the housing crash there, and that left like a persistent capacity gap in terms of just developers and construction companies' ability to continue to build out housing once the correction subsided on there. Like, it's not great if your entire new housing construction ecosystem significantly degrades following a market correction, but that said, it's not that big a correction, and hopefully it wouldn't be the case where they won't make it through. And just one final thought, like, a lot of the unsold condos are kind of in the $1 million price range. Like, how much is this actually going to be a good use of money just on this is just a lot of money per unit to put down?
Like, at the end of the day, it's kind of like one of those non-ideal policies, but that can deliver okay results in the short term in terms of, hey, there are over 2,000 homes that people could be living in tomorrow. Why don't we just take the homes and put the people in them? Boom. It works from that point of view. And that's better than hoping municipalities, play nice and cut fees, and that all of the, downstream effects in 5 years when those houses get built are more affordable. So I'll give them credit for doing something novel here. And I guess we'll see how well this works out and how much, because they don't put a price tag on that either, other than they're going to use innovative financing tools. So maybe their argument is, rather than just dumping public money into it, they are getting assets. So they're going to take loans that they can then hold against that. And because they will rent these out, could pay for themselves as BC policy solutions has argued.
You could actually get to pay for itself just based on the price tag of what a lot of the unsold condos are at, particularly because they are pitching this as an affordable homes thing. So
yeah,
there's a delta there that's going to have to be made up somewhere, and that's going to be probably the federal government's budget. Well,
in any case, it's money for British Columbia and money for housing, which has been needed, and it's a good start. At least it's better than nothing. Kind of fulfills Carney's election promise of trying to work to reduce DCC development cost charges, and TBD how well it works. Other things that are TBD is medical assistance in dying for people whose sole underlying medical condition is a mental illness. The Joint Parliamentary Senate Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying has just issued its report on MAID for mental illnesses, and has said a lot of different things because it's a big committee and no one could agree. But what they could all kind of agree is not yet. And the answer of when goes from, well, let's at least see what the Supreme Court of Canada says, to indefinitely never. The latter, indefinitely exclude MAID from mental illnesses in the criminal code, comes from the majority report and is echoed by Senator Dal Fond, the Liberal on the committee, or a Liberal on the committee. Refer it to the Supreme Court of Canada is the preferred approach of Senators Moody, Wallen, and Wells, and the Bloc Québécois. And the Conservatives say, hey, we have a bill that would exclude medical assistance in dying from people with mental illnesses. Just pass that, and the Liberals should just do what we say. In the most, the Bloc, does its thing and talks about Quebec a lot too. So everyone had to get their word in on this report.
Did you actually read the Quebec or Bloc one in close detail?
I haven't read it the whole report in much detail, so I skimmed little bits of it. There's interesting stuff in the block one, and some of it is written very funny. It also has a really good, I did see the block has a good review of past committee reports on medical assistance in dying. So they give a little more consideration to where the committee has been in the past versus where it is today.
Okay, I was specifically curious. It's the one part of the report I did not actually get to read before we started this, and I was a little curious because Quebec is one of 2 provinces that provincially has prohibited MAID for solely mental illness, and I was a little curious how they square the circle on that with their pretty, I think, generally strong approach to being pro that.
Yeah, they argue that Quebec has an end-of-life care commission, which is regularly updating and looking at this. I didn't find anything about their comparison with the Quebec legislation specifically, other than for the federal government to work with Quebec on this. They do say that Quebec's Minister of Health, Sonia Bélanger, wrote to the committee stating that although Quebec has currently chosen to expand the MAID to cover neurodegenerative diseases rather than for MAID, MD, SUMC, the discussion on the subject remains open. So I think their view is Quebec isn't there yet, but it hasn't said never. And they're not saying the federal government should jump there right away. No one in here says mental illness should be permitted for MAID in March when the current law sunsets. But there are, the most supportive are the ones who point to the constitutionality and the existing charter challenges. There is a current charter challenge by someone with a mental disorder who is trying to access MAID. And one senator in here, Delfond, actually does recommend that approach for anyone else who is suffering. And that could be an interim stopgap, is if you are in that suffering, you can always sue, which is, I'm sure, really reassuring for a lot of people who are suffering and struggling with mental illness to go, hey, why don't you get a lawyer? Is that something you can handle right now?
Yeah. On the constitutionality, like several of the main report and several of the, particularly the supplementary ones, do note that the Carter ruling does give the federal government pretty wide latitude in terms of setting the specific parameters around MAID, and there's a solid argument that would be therefore constitutional on it. So don't think it's an open and shut case on that respect. Reading the main committee's findings and their piece on it, it strikes me as a pretty well balanced piece. A lot of, some witnesses said this, some witnesses said the opposite. There was no real clear consensus among either the expert witnesses or the broader group of witnesses that came forward on this, particularly with respect to the ability to distinguish suicidality from MAID requests, as well as it's unclear whether the mental illness falls into the category of forget the exact word, basically irreparableness, irreversibleness on it. So as such, they're recommending it not proceed going forward. Sean Fraser is Sean Fraser. He's the attorney. Sorry, cut that. Attorney General Sean Fraser said he's basically going to take the summer to consider this, and that deserves a lot of thought. So he's not going to rush into taking a position on the committee report on it. Carney, I don't think has commented on this, but a couple weeks ago had basically said he doesn't have a strong view on the matter, and is basically going to wait to see what the committee report says before making a decision on how he wants the government to proceed on this. So, be interesting to see where the government goes with respect to this going forward. But it's probably going to feature into the fall session and be one of those more discussed and more controversial bits of legislation, depending on what happens with it.
Yeah, I'm a pretty strong supporter of medical assistance in dying, and I think I think the thing that's been frustrating most about this discussion is we've been talking so broadly about made for mental disorders for a while, and like past reports, as the block points out, from this same committee have said it's to get there, we need to start setting up the processes and the systems to, the guardrails. But we're still having that first conversation about should it even happen? Could it even happen? And if we'd have spent the time setting up the guardrails, probably could do it and have it be safe. Other countries do have made for mental disorders or similar procedures, frameworks. They don't know. Canada's the only place that calls it MAID, but we're still in this broad, like top level, like paternalistic view, essentially, of people with mental disorders that I find very frustrating and discriminatory. Frankly, it singles out mental disorder as different than a physical disorder when the brain is part of the body, in my view. But
I mean, it is part of the body, but these are things that manifest differently, and particularly the suicidality point, I think, is something that really cannot be ignored on this one, because a common feature of many mental illnesses is suicidality, and it is the general approach of the medical community to work to prevent suicide even to the point of people can be involuntarily detained and placed under treatment to prevent it. Like there's a real tension there, and particularly with something that is so final as MAID, it's something that I am entirely fine with taking a long time to really make sure that this is something that not only that we both decide whether this is something we should be doing, and then make sure we get all of the details right on it. And that's, in that respect, I'm generally supportive of the suggestion to not proceed on this, as well as in the report, they do note that several witnesses do raise concerns about the effectiveness of the current safeguards in place, particularly with respect to Track 2 MAID. That is the non-foreseeable death portion of the system. That we probably should be doing some more work to make sure that that is as squared away as it needs to be before we work to expand the program.
Well, the courts may make the decision sooner, and that's been the way this has moved historically, is Track 2 exists because the government decided to close doors after Carter. Like Carter set out a very broad description. And the Carter case was brought by at least one of the plaintiffs in the Carter case had a mental disorder, I believe their sole underlying mental condition. So it's not unprecedented, these issues.
But Carter also gave the government pretty wide latitude in terms of actually setting up the parameters.
That's not my read on Carter. My read on Carter was that if you have a grievous and irremediable condition, the government you have a constitutional right here.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it says that in there specifically that the government has fairly wide latitude, and particularly provincial governments who run the healthcare systems and handle the actual healthcare administration portions.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of latitude in terms of did it have to be physician prescribed, or could people take it themselves? Oral pill versus injection. The court didn't care about any of that and left that wide open. And government actually went pretty wide on that approach, which was interesting compared to how Oregon is a pretty regulated state for how you can access assisted dying there. But what conditions qualify was left pretty broad when I read Carter. I mean, different people are going to disagree, as this set of reports, let's call it, showcase. Honestly, I'd be surprised if the government didn't move to indefinitely exclude MAID for mental disorders, and just kicked it further down. But we'll see how the summer goes. These parliamentary committees, like some of the senators like Wells, and have spoken out and said that they felt like they didn't get a full breadth of opinion, or that anti voices kind of dominated large chunks of the hearings. And so maybe, the government will hear differently over the coming months. I still don't see them being ready for MAID for mental disorders in March 2027, which suggests some kind of amendment will come. But this report gives them plenty of room to go for an indefinite extension.
Yeah, I heard that complaint. Reading through the actual majority report on it, one definitely doesn't get the sense that things were stacked, and they do present a pretty balanced picture.
Scott, every parliamentary committee report does that, regardless of how it's like some people said this and some people said that. And maybe it was balanced, or maybe it wasn't, and they just presented it as balanced. But every parliamentary report does try to say the breadth of the opinion they heard, regardless of how voluminous, how loud one side or the other was.
Fair. I'm just saying, it does not come across as particularly biased on there. And there has been a fair bit of pushback from various experts on this particular thing. Addition to the people they heard at committee, a couple months ago, the heads of 13 psychiatric programs at various medical schools wrote in opposing the expansion to MAID. The UN Committee on Disability Rights has similarly raised concerns around Canada's approach to MAID. It's the sort of thing where there is actually quite a bit of disagreement on it, and there really does not appear to be anywhere near a pro-MAID for solely mental illnesses consensus among the medical profession on this. And absent that consensus, it's a pretty strong case to not rush into things. And similarly, a pretty strong case for courts to not go running ahead on this one before that consensus can be established. This is the sort of thing that really should be done through the deliberative work of Parliament, not on edge cases that make their way through the court system.
I mean, the courts are a deliberative process as well, just in a different framework. But we are at 1 hour, so let's move into our final thing, that is the House of Commons has also run out of time.
Kind of. They actually rose a day ahead of schedule.
That'll happen when you pass closure motions. And what Elizabeth May says is at a rate she's never seen. And I don't know if that's
always
true.
Says that.
Right? I'm pretty sure that was Harper did that a lot. I don't know if Carney has now done it more than Harper did at his peak, but
it's not uncommon for a bunch of bills to get fast-tracked at the end of a session. I don't have the stats in front of me, but it would not surprise me if, sometime middle of the Trudeau years, or at some point during Harper's time, that time allocation motions were also used to the same effect and roughly the same quantity, if not more.
In any case, we now have a lawful access bill has gone through the House of Commons, a number of other bills as well. Changes to the military's justice process have received royal assent following passage in both houses. And, the Liberal House leader is talking about 21 bills passed this year, which actually feels like a pretty good number for
it's a decent amount
in these recent years.
Yeah, particularly because the Trudeau government was terrible about actually managing the parliamentary process, and they had some sessions where not much actually happened. And that was even before kind of the last year or two where things really ground to a halt.
Yeah, all I have to say to the opposition who are complaining about how the government is, in their view, abusing its majority as well, you shouldn't have let them have it by having your members cross. Because that's how we got here. So,
yeah, and every party but the Bloc has a little bit fault of that one. Just the Greens too, but who even remembers them? Also, they only had one person. They couldn't exactly cross it, not just fold the party at the same time.
Yeah, she did vote for them once, but not in recent months.
So, other stuff that passed this session. Bill related to the Spring Economic Update, self-government agreement with First Nations and Northwest Territories that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce because I'm definitely going to get that one wrong. Financial crimes agencies enabling legislation, as well as the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act, and a Child Protection and Gender-Based Violence Act as well.
So, I'm sure there's lots we could talk about on all of those, but I'm tired and we're over an hour. So I don't know. Any closing thoughts on the Liberal session?
Reasonably productive. Glad to see a couple of those bills make it through. Particularly the bail one and a couple others. No doubt we'll see the lawful access bill continue to be controversial, even with some of the changes they recently made to it at the end. We're not going to go into that. I'll throw the link in the show notes on that one if you're interested in reading that. But no doubt the Senate is going to have thoughts on that one, so we will probably see this continue to be an issue.
And that has been Politicoast. Find links to everything we talked about at politicoast.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicoast. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicoast is a production of Leg and Bute Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.